We are told a comforting story. It is a story of numbers. We hear that the economy is growing. Gross domestic product, or GDP, is on the rise. This number is presented as the ultimate sign of progress and well-being. If it goes up, we are told, our lives are getting better. We are led to believe that this single metric captures the health of our societies. This belief forms the foundation of our political and economic decisions, a guiding star that promises a brighter future for everyone as long as the numbers keep climbing higher and higher. This story, however, leaves out the most important part of the picture. This story of endless growth is a dangerous mirage. It creates a false sense of security. GDP counts every transaction as a positive. A catastrophic oil spill that requires billions of dollars in cleanup efforts? That makes GDP go up. A devastating hurricane that necessitates massive rebuilding projects and emergency spending? That also boosts GDP. The metric makes no distinction between activities that enhance our lives and those that arise from disaster and destruction. It is a calculator that only knows how to add, treating the liquidation of our planet's natural wealth as income, not as the depletion of a finite and essential asset. The problem is that our economic system has a great blind spot. It is blind to the very real physical limits of our planet. It does not see the clean air, fresh water, stable climate, and healthy ecosystems that underpin all human activity and, indeed, all life. These are treated as externalities, as free inputs to be exploited without consequence. The logic of the market suggests that if something does not have a price tag, it has no value. We have built a global economic engine that is brilliant at creating monetary wealth, but is utterly incapable of recognizing the true, foundational wealth upon which it depends. This blindness is not an accident. It is a core feature of an economic ideology that prioritizes extraction above all else. For decades, we have been racing forward, our eyes fixed on the speedometer of GDP, completely ignoring the warning signs flashing on the dashboard. We have celebrated the speed of our journey without ever asking if we are driving straight toward a cliff. The illusion of progress has been maintained by deliberately ignoring the ecological debt we are accumulating. A debt that, unlike financial deficits, cannot be renegotiated or bailed out. The bill is coming due, and it will be paid not in currency, but in stability. Far from the centers of global finance, in the vast frozen landscapes of the polar regions, the planet is sending its clearest warning. The Arctic and Antarctic are not just remote, icy wildernesses. They are the Earth's air conditioning system. Their massive ice sheets and glaciers act as giant mirrors, reflecting the sun's heat back into space. This phenomenon, known as the albedo effect, is crucial for regulating global temperatures. For millennia, this brilliant white shield has helped maintain the delicate climate balance that allowed human civilizations to flourish. It is a fundamental pillar of the stable world we have always taken for granted. Now, that pillar is cracking. As our industrial economies continue to pump greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, the planet warms, and the ice melts at an accelerating rate. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. As the reflective white ice disappears, it exposes the darker land or ocean beneath. This dark surface absorbs more of the sun's energy instead of reflecting it, which in turn causes even more warming, which melts even more ice. It is a vicious cycle that has been set in motion by our collective actions, a runaway train that our economic models completely fail to account for. The Arctic is warming at least twice as fast as the rest of the planet, acting as a canary in the global coal mine. The consequences of this polar meltdown extend far beyond the frozen north. The melting of the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets is a primary driver of global sea level rise, threatening coastal communities and economies around the world. But the impacts are even more immediate. The temperature difference between the cold Arctic and the warmer mid-latitudes is what drives the jet stream, the high-altitude river of air that dictates our weather patterns. As the Arctic warms faster than the equator, this temperature difference shrinks, causing the jet stream to become weaker and more unstable, like a wobbling top. This destabilization is no longer a future prediction. It is our current reality. It leads to more extreme and persistent weather events. We see prolonged droughts and heat waves in some regions, while others are battered by historic floods and polar vortex events that bring frigid Arctic air plunging south. These are not random acts of nature. They are the direct result of a planetary system being thrown out of balance by a warming Arctic. The climate chaos we are beginning to experience is a message sent from the poles, telling us that the physical systems that support our world are beginning to break down under the strain. There is a profound and growing disconnect between the practices of our major industries and the urgent needs of the environment. The dominant model remains one of extraction, take, make, and dispose. This linear process was conceived in an era when natural resources seemed limitless, and the planet's capacity to absorb our waste felt infinite. Fossil fuel companies continue to explore for new reserves. Agricultural giants rely on chemical-intensive monocultures that degrade soil, and manufacturing industries churn out products designed for short-term use and eventual disposal. Each of these sectors operates according to a logic that externalizes environmental costs. The transition to sustainable practices is failing not because of a lack of technology or knowledge, but because of a lack of will. The powerful inertia of the status quo is formidable. The existing economic system is heavily invested in the extractive model. Trillions of dollars are tied up in fossil fuel infrastructure, and entire economies are built around it. The promise of a green transition has, in many cases, become a public relations exercise rather than a fundamental shift in operations. Companies announce ambitious net zero targets for the distant future, while simultaneously lobbying governments to weaken environmental regulations in the present. This is not a transition, it is a delay tactic. This disparity is starkly illustrated by the chasm between scientific warnings and corporate actions. Climate scientists have been unequivocal for decades. We must rapidly and drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions to avert catastrophe. Yet, the response from the industries most responsible has been to fight a war against that science. They have funded disinformation campaigns to sow doubt and confusion, captured political processes to ensure subsidies keep flowing, and framed the climate crisis as a matter of individual consumer choice rather than a systemic problem demanding systemic change. They are actively working to protect a business model that is pushing us toward collapse. The failure to align industrial practices with ecological reality is not just an environmental issue, it is a profound economic risk. We are attempting to run a 21st century global society on a 19th century industrial operating system. This system is incompatible with a finite planet. The longer we pretend it can be tweaked or reformed at the margins, the more severe the eventual shock will be. The disconnect is not a small gap to be bridged. It is a deep canyon. On one side are the physical laws of nature, and on the other is an economic ideology that believes it can defy them. Nature, however, does not negotiate. The inevitable consequence of ignoring our environmental blind spot is a great economic smash. This isn't a typical recession or market correction that can be fixed with stimulus packages or interest rate adjustments. It is a fundamental collision between an infinitely demanding economic system and a finite planet. We are already seeing the first tremors of this impact. Supply chains are disrupted by extreme weather events. Agricultural yields are threatened by drought and soil degradation. Insurance costs are skyrocketing in disaster-prone areas, creating uninsurable zones. These are not isolated incidents. They are the symptoms of a deeply unstable foundation. Financial stability is impossible without environmental stability. You cannot have a healthy economy on a sick planet. For too long, we have chased the phantom of wealth while systematically dismantling the real wealth that supports us. We have treated nature as a subsidiary to the economy, a resource to be liquidated for profit. The truth is the other way around. The economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment. When the parent company goes bankrupt, the subsidiary collapses with it. The financial risks of climate change, from stranded assets to infrastructure damage, are now so large that even the most conservative financial institutions are being forced to acknowledge them. The necessary pivot is away from an economy of extraction and toward an economy of stability. This requires a radical reordering of our priorities. Instead of asking, how much can we grow? We must start asking, what do we need to thrive within planetary boundaries? A stability-based economy would prioritize human and ecological well-being over endless accumulation. Its goal would not be to maximize GDP, but to maximize resilience, fairness, and health. This means investing in regenerative agriculture that rebuilds soil, shifting to decentralized renewable energy systems, and designing circular economies where waste is eliminated and materials are reused. This shift is not about sacrificing progress. It is about redefining it. True progress is not a number that goes up forever. It is clean water to drink, healthy food to eat, safe communities, and a stable climate that can support future generations. These are the real assets, the true measures of a successful society. Building an economy that protects and nurtures these assets is the most important and urgent project of our time. It requires us to abandon the dangerous illusion of endless extraction and embrace the life-affirming logic of stewardship and stability. The choice is not between the economy and the environment. The choice is between a fantasy of infinite growth and a future that is actually livable.